Article 4. Understanding the world's love for uTata. Open quotes. His day is done. Is done. The news came on the wings of a wind, reluctant to carry its burden. Nelson Mandela's day is done. The news, expected and still unwelcome, reached us in the United States, and suddenly our world became somber. Our skies were leadened. His day is done. We see you, South African people, standing speechless at the slamming of that final door through which no traveller returns. Our spirits reach out to you, Bantu, Zulu, Xhosa, Boer. We think of you and your son of Africa, your father, your one more wonder of the world. We send our souls to you. Close quotes. This beautiful eulogy was written by the late Maya Angelou and sent to us as the people of South Africa, literally hours after the international world had been informed of Madiba's passing away. From then on, we witnessed what for all intents and purposes was an extraordinary occurrence in global history. From literally all four corners of the world, we caught glimpses of the sympathy and the empathy that was extended to us as a people, and we were humbled and awed. Similar to the beauty of our national celebrations, we watched the world celebrate uTata in diverse and creative ways, all of them honoring a man whom they loved, a man whose name they deemed worthy to be written in the great hall of fame of history, many times over again. For some South Africans, the true magnitude and authenticity of the world's sharing of our grief might have only sunk in when they witnessed its practical expression through the foreign dignitaries that came to his funeral to say goodbye. The diversity of the international delegation that took time out of its busy schedule was indeed, on some level, quite surprising. From heads of states to journalists, from world-renowned private sector leaders to ordinary people who simply felt that they needed to be here to share this moment in history. Witnessing the world coming to say goodbye to uTata was, plainly put, nothing short of amazing and magnificent. As I watched the world united with us in grief and celebration, I suddenly realized something. The fact that I'd always known that the world loved him, but I never quite knew how much until he was gone. It furthermore dawned on me that I did not, until those 10 days, carry within myself a firm and deep conviction and understanding of why this was so. Mandela stood for something. He stood for something that is unique and precious. He stood for something that is rare and that, perhaps more than ever in our current times, is sorely needed in the world as many countries battle the effects of poor leadership, internal conflicts and wars, and all other kinds of ills that lead to endless forms and faces of human pain and suffering. Yes, uTata stood for the often quoted important principle of servant leadership, but he embodied more than that. He stood for ideals that are true, eternal, and immortal, ideals that are embraced by all great leaders who leave an indelible mark in the pages of history. These are leaders who have their names reverberating through the passage of time and the eternal now. Leaders whose light is never dimmed either by the cynicism of humankind, nor that of age, nor that of Kronos time. Open quotes. I accept this award today with an audacious faith in the future of mankind. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature ought to make him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding of events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnights of racism and war that the bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of thermonuclear destruction. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right temporarily defeated is stronger than evil triumphant. I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and whining bullets, there is still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I believe that wounded justice, lying prostrate on the blood-flowing streets of our nations, can be lifted up from this dust of shame to reign supreme among the children of men. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. I believe that what self-centered men have torn down, men other-centered can build up. I still believe that we shall overcome. Close quotes. Mandela could as well have stated the above quoted words, which were confidently spoken by another giant soul, Martin Luther King Jr., for they are the uncompromising words of leadership and vision that reflects the conviction of a great soul. They speak to the purest parts of every person whose heart aspires to see something other than evil triumph in human relations. They call forth from within us that which is good and noble, that which is beautiful and true. Further, Tata's life embodied the essence of his ideals. So often within leadership circles, leaders will make statements that they know are true simply because they believe that people would like to hear them. What they then clearly miss is the fact that it is not speaking the words that makes what you say carry weight, but how much your life measures up in respect of you being able to speak the said words with authenticity. The question as a leader is always the age-old one that is faced by every parent. Are you telling your child to do as you say or to do as you do? Are you walking the talk? From where I stand, walking the talk meant a couple of profound realities for Tata. Firstly, it most obviously meant him having ideals during the apartheid era that he ultimately went to prison for, ideals that he was willing to die for. As we all know well, these later translated to him refusing to sacrifice the people, so to speak, in order to gain his freedom. However, it also meant him choosing to not be defeated by the everyday realities of being on Robben Island. It meant him needing to find within himself and within the community of his comrades the faith and ability to be focused and resolute during what I am certain, more oftentimes than not, seemed like a never-ending nightmare. Open quotes. Faith can give us courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride towards the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we will know that we are living in the creative turmoil of a genuine civilization struggling to be born, inspired with a new dedication to humanity. Close quotes. Much has been said about his capacity to forgive and reconcile with those who are his oppressors, and about his ability to hold his country together when it threatened to break apart. However, the retelling of these stories should in no way take away from the essence or the power of them. For I am certain that many of us can attest to the reality of the struggle to forgive. How often are we a part of or do we hear stories about family members and friends who have not spoken to each other in years because of offenses committed? The act of forgiveness and letting go, the ability to convince an entire nation to somehow find it within itself to try and forgive and let the past go, is something that can only be done by someone who is largesse, spacious and roomy in their capacity for loving humanity and their ability to exercise their humanity. Here again, one has to only switch on the news to see how nations are being torn apart on a daily basis in our modern day. Leaders constantly and commonly, day by day and minute by minute, use violence and power to destroy not only their enemies, but also their people. These daily images alone are enough to make one deeply appreciate why the world recognized and rightly paid homage to Madiba's magnanimity of heart and soul. After we laid him to rest, an English friend of mine sent me a clip of an interview that uTata had conducted in the US shortly after he was released from prison. It was then that I thought to myself, "Oya Hazel kaGumede, you took so much for granted, and yet you knew so little." I took for granted the fact that the international community accepted us, and I did not know how hard Madiba had worked to persuade, charm, and convince them that the South Africa to be birthed was, for lack of a better term, a horse which was worth betting on. I took for granted the fact that we were friends with all the peoples of the world, that we shook hands with people who were enemies, until I listened to uTata stand on principle, convincing Jewish people in the audience during that interview about the correctness of his decision to have fruitful relationships with Palestinians as well as with Jews. I watched uTata convince Americans that it was in order for South Africa to be on friendly relations with the United States as well as with Cuba. I watched him refuse to be boxed and labeled when he told capitalists that they need not fear if South Africa decided to chart a different economic path. That difference did not mean socialism or communism or wrong or evil. That different, if it did happen, would merely mean what is right and best for South Africa. I also watched him sternly and resolutely make a point in 1 minute, then laugh with, not at, the interviewer, Ted Koppel, and make him feel comfortable just when Koppel was beginning to feel threatened. Simply put, Madiba charmed the world. He charmed the world with the authenticity of his character. He charmed the world with the perennial nature of his ideals. He charmed the world with the magnanimity of his soul. He charmed the world with his unflinching convictions. And last, but certainly not least, he charmed the world with his wicked sense of humor. At his memorial service, Obama noted that uTata understood the ties that bind the human spirit. Indeed, this statement sums it all up for me. It was Madiba's ability to tap into the human spirit of not only us as South Africans, but also that of the peoples of the world, that made him more than earn his place in history. The world did not just love him because he was a so-called nice man. The world loved him because the essence of his personhood tugged at the umbilical cord of every human spirit. And as the last great liberator of the 20th century, he reminded all of us about what we as humans are capable of standing for and achieving. He gave much to the world, and it was only appropriate and fitting that on his death, the world would stop for a while, that it paused for a long, sweet, and palpable moment in order to grieve and celebrate his life. It was only right, because he gave all of us dreams and visions of what we are capable of. He gave us intimations of immortality. Yes, Mandela's day is done. Yet we, his inheritors, will open the gates wider for reconciliation. He has offered us understanding. Nelson Mandela's day is done. We confess it in tearful voices, yet we lift our voices to say, thank you.